G'day, Bomber fans. We are back. Player ratings. Apologies for missing last week. I did not have time, but, in hindsight, I think it is probably better that we're here now after the win and not talking about the game last week. So that is good. It is going to be a happier video than what we would have had, after the Dogs game. Lots to discuss today. Injuries, form worries, some response matches, an incredible debut. So, yeah. Big range of ratings today. Let's just get right into it. Let's rate all the players from Dreamtime, starting with, as always, Andy McGrath, our vice captain. And yeah, he had a pretty standard Andy McGrath game. I think, when you check the comments and there's no one posting his stats to defend him, or there's no one, criticizing him, that's when it was a pretty average 7 out of 10 game. Oh, not average. He was good. And look, I think going into the game, Richmond's their biggest threats inside 50 were on ground level. Seth Campbell, Ryan Mansell, Maurice Rioli. I don't remember any of them having an impact. I don't really know who McGrath was, sitting on, but whoever he was on wasn't really doing much because their smalls weren't doing much. So that's good. He racked up the pill, over 500 metres gained, went on some big runs through the middle of the ground. What I will say, though, and there's one play that sums this up, and you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. He goes on a run, takes on about 4 or 5 players, bounces the ball, 100 times. He bounces every 3 steps, McGrath. He's never going to get done for running too far because he loves to bounce. And it's looking great. And then he goes inside 50 and laces out with a beautiful kick, a Richmond player on the chest. And yeah, I think that summed up his night. He did so much right for most of the night, but just made a few too many mistakes for me to really think of him as someone that was in our best. It led the ground, or equal most turnovers for the game with Archie Roberts. And yeah, part of that's trying to inject creativity, but yeah, the conditions weren't really there for it. I think he could have been a bit more effective than what he was, and a bit more mature maybe. So yeah, I don't think it was bad. I thought he was good. I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. But yeah, a few mistakes in there, which is probably keeping him from being one of our best. Kyle Langford. Yeah, unfortunately... I should say, I am recording this before the scans, so I don't know if, Reid is injured or not. And we don't know how long Langford's out for. Of the two, though, I think it is pretty clear that Langford has done something. You go down kicking with your kicking leg with a quad injury, you clutch your quad, you can't really run off. That's more than just awareness, that is an injury. So, yeah, he's going to be on the sidelines for a month or two, you'd think, which is not good because he just hasn't had a clean run on it at all this year. And we need him there. We need him for Caddy. Even if it wasn't for Caddy, he could have been a defensive option with Reid down. So, it's annoying. Before his injury in the game, I thought he was fine. He barely played. I think he went off in the second quarter. But he, had a nice contested mark, which ended up being a goal for Clarke. That's all I really remember. I'm going to give him a 5. Just by default, really. I don't really know too much of what happened before the injury. Maybe that's harsh. Maybe he was, on track for a 9. Or maybe it's very generous and he was not having a good night. But I think a 5, with an injury, it's kind of the default that early into a game. And speaking of injuries, lots of criticism before Langford coming into the game, but Jye Caldwell, so pretty similar. He returned from a hamstring injury a few weeks ago that he suffered earlier in the year. He clearly struggled to get back to his best, much like Langford. I thought he played his poorest game in the red and black against the Dogs. I would have given him like a 2 or 3 if I released that video. But yeah, he's back now. You can't keep him down for long. Someone that competitive and determined is always going to find form, and yeah, he did. He was massive for us in the contest. Last week he has 2 tackles. This week he's got 11, the most on ground. His grunt and contest work was awesome, and we had a really good blend of inside and out in the guts, and Caldwell was a big reason for that. Led the ground for contested possessions with 16. You really felt intent from him this week, which probably wasn't the case against the Dogs. Yeah, I thought he was great. He returned to that early season form, so I'm going to give him an 8. It was just a really good inside midfielders game, and it was a very important zone on the night. If the midfield isn't up and about, we don't win that game of footy, but it was, and Caldwell was a big reason for that, so well done. And also back in form, by the way, Zach Merrett. Last 2 weeks before this, he has 19 touches and 20 touches, I think. He's playing very poor footy. I thought he was really just nowhere against the Dogs, much like Caldwell. And then he goes out and gets, the highest amount of touches on the ground. I think he had 20 at half-time. He wasn't his typical self by footy, but again, the conditions don't really allow that. It was very wet and slippery, so it makes it tough for players like Merrett who thrive on, their best footy is good ball use. It was hard for him to impact the game as much as he usually does. But, I thought his work rate to get around, plop himself deep in D50, helped us set up movement. I'd love the AFL to release individual distance covered stats. I think they only do the top 5. But I'd really like to see what Merrett got up to, because I thought that was one of his best aerobic performances of the year. So I'm going to give him the 8. Not his usual great game of footy. I guess he won heaps of the ball. But I thought he responded really well after a very poor game last week. He was arguably our third or fourth best. And which I guess means he was probably third or fourth best on ground, because there weren't really many Richmond players at his level. From Merrett to the sub, Ben Hobbs. As I say every week, it is always tougher being the sub. So the Goblin had it, it was tough for him. It's even tougher, by the way, in those conditions, because, in a normal game, you have to settle in after everyone else, find the flow of the game. But in the wet, it is just tougher. There's a few things that you need to get going quicker if you're the sub. And I thought he probably lacked a bit early. I don't think it was really much of a factor until the final quarter when the team lifted. I don't think he was really involved before that, aside from some nice moments. He did have a few nice little hand passes out of traffic to give us space. I feel like when he had the pill, I was seeing him do some good things with it. I don't remember any glaring mistakes or down moments, which is good. The only downside is the fact that I don't really remember much. So as of right now, I think he gets a 6 or a 5. Oh, 6. I'll give him the sub benefit of the doubt. He's someone who doesn't need heaps of the ball. He doesn't need 20 or 25 to have an impact. But I don't know if we'd really be looking at his performance, even as the sub, and thinking that we can settle with that in our 23. With players coming back in. I reckon with Parrish coming back, we might be looking at a smaller player to come out. And with Guelfi in the forward line now, with Gresham back, Hobbs is kind of the one staring at you in the face a little bit. So I don't think he was at his worst, but. In the next few weeks we'll see if he keeps his spot in the team, because it's going to be tough with players coming back and more debutants being blooded. He gets a 6. Isaac Kako felt like he was getting pretty high up the ground this week, which is probably because we actually had some more coverage around him. Last week was tough. The week before as well. He's having to play as a small forward with Archer Daywicks for help, which no offense to Daywicks or Kako, but that's just not really good for development. I think it's probably good that we saw them rested separately and that they've played separate footy, because they do need some maturity around them, and luckily he had that with Guelfi and Gresham back. I think he only had 4 of his 15 touches inside the 50, so he had more touches in the defensive half than inside 50, so that probably shows you the way he was playing. Lots of link-up handballs. I do think he was doing plenty right. We're not going to look at his fantasy score and think that he was involved, but it was better than what he's been doing, or even last week. I thought he was almost droppable last week, but I'm glad he gets a game with more help around him on ground level. Doesn't hit the scoreboard, but there's less pressure on his shoulders, more room for him to, just play his role. I still think he wasn't really much of a factor. He's probably decreased a bit in output, both scoring-wise, but also through pressure. Which is less important in this game. But I think maybe he's tiring, maybe he's just off his best. That's fine. First year player. He gets a 5 out of 10. There is some weird talk going around, by the way, and I know this won't be the case in my community. I think you guys will know what you're talking about. But I've seen people, kind of throw around the flop title a bit, and I think Essendon fans are maybe a bit quick to do that. You can see room for him to get the McGrath treatment from some fans if it goes down that way. We kind of cling on to high draft picks and hate on them when they're not Gary Ablett. Less of an issue with Kako, still a fan favourite, but temper expectations. It's his first year, is all I got to say. He gets a 5. Onto his partner Jade Gresham, who doesn't get a 5, and I think we can clearly have higher expectations for him. First game back for injury, so I guess that, take that into account a bit, but he was just off it. He had 10 disposals, 6 of them were effective, which isn't ideal when, most of what you do is a hand pass. Only the 3 kicks for the night, 2 score involvements, that's the same amount as Ben McKay, by the way. Yeah, I don't want to be overly critical of a player in his return game from injury, but he was probably the poorest on the night for us, and he was also the poorest of the smalls in terms of pressure, basing off pressure acts. Yeah, I just thought he was a non-factor, and if it wasn't for injuries, he was probably the sub option. So I'm going to give him a 3. We've seen Gresham at his best a few times this year. He had an awesome start to the year, and if you compare some of those games to this one, it's a big contrast. He needs to be doing a lot better than that. So hopefully it's just first game back, nerves and jitters, but yeah, that wasn't good. Will Setterfield, that was probably his most promising performance of the year, I'd say. Not his best, but most, I feel like he's had some great games, but I loved this role and how effective it was. Last week he was on Bont a bit. Bont still had a fair impact, I'd say, but this week he's playing a negating role on Tim Taranto, and he's still got him inside his pocket. He didn't really run around with him, around the ground, so Taranto still got 23 touches and 2 goals, but you can let him do that. I think, his touches, no offense to Taranto, but they don't really have that much damage behind them. 4 score involvements, 2 of those goals are flukes, if we're being honest. Yeah, I think Taranto does his best work in the contest, and he just didn't do any of that because Setterfield was wearing him like a glove. He had just 2 clearances. To put that into perspective, he's only hit numbers that low twice in his last 50 games before this. But Setterfield kept him down. It was a big reason why we were so dominant in the contest. Realistically, he's probably our role player of the night. I gave it to Angus Clarke, which, the narrative, you kind of have to. And I thought Clarke was great, but Setterfield was awesome. That is a great role player's performance. He didn't do heaps himself, but he keeps their most dangerous midfielder down. Helped us win, so he gets an 8. Really, really good stuff. And if we can see more of that, who are we playing next? Brisbane. If he could play roles on... Neil's a bit tough, but, players like that in the coming weeks, there's a clear spot for him in the team in the future. So that's good. He's playing good footy at a good time. Jayden Laverde. He was a part of that back 6 that just, clamped down the game. So, I honestly, they didn't have anyone of note up there that Laverde was really playing on. And, with the wet conditions, it was even harder for them to mark. So, I don't think Laverde really had heaps to do. He was commanding when called into action, but rarely forced to do so. I don't really remember him being involved at all. But when he was fine. So, yeah, I think a 6 seems fair. I don't have much to say. No notes. I guess what I do have to say is, so if Reid is injured, which I'm hoping he's not, but you would think he at least misses Brisbane if it's a hamstring awareness. We might be relying on Laverde, who is our 5th string key defender. Remember, he played after Lewis Hayes, to be our 2nd key back behind McKay. So, yeah, hopefully more games where we're not talking about him too much, because if that's the case, he's doing his job. We really, if we're not talking about Laverde, that's good. That is a good thing. Archie Perkins. Really interesting game, actually. Role shift. We always love a role shift, and there were a few of those this week, but it felt like he was playing quite a bit more midfield than usual. And that was odd, because we had Sheila in the team. We could have brought Sardis back in. Instead, we're trying to, give more time to Perkins, which I don't think is a bad thing. Perkins is young and developing himself. This year he's been, primarily that forward, a bit of a marking target at times, but this week he was heavy at the contest. He had 6 clearances, over 20 touches, and look, I thought his ball use and decision making was pretty, what's the word? Is it bad? There was some really questionable moments from young Perkins, but I liked the fact that he spent time in there. It's a good little thing to have a goal a game forward who can pinch hit in the guts when needed and when it mattered. When he had a chance to hit the scoreboard, he did. So that's Perkins. He's just a clinical player inside 50. If you give him the ball inside 50, he's probably going to kick a goal. He doesn't get heaps of chances, but when he does, he makes them count. So yeah, I'm going to give him a 6. I thought he did well to get his hands on the footy first a lot of the time. Some really tough moments in the contest, some good moments when inside 50, but also, his fair share of mistakes. And that's pretty rare for Perkins. At least he's getting involved in a new role and getting more experience in there. And he's slightly down because of something that we don't really talk about too much with him. When he's down, when Perkins is having a bad game, it's usually because he's not getting around the footy. But yeah, he was getting around the footy, so you got to be, somewhat happy with his performance, even though there were mistakes. Todd Goldstein. I'm going to give him a 7. I think, I'll give him a 7. I was just looking at his stats. Look, I reckon if he plays like that against Nankervis, he gets an 8 or, not like a high rating. But yeah, his opponent was a younger, skinnier Samson Ryan. He really struggled to match Goldie in the ruck Ryan. I thought Goldie had a huge impact. 38 hitouts, team high 8 clearances. Still negative meters gained somehow. I don't know how that's possible. Yeah, we had our massive domination in the middle because of him, I'd say. Around the ground, you can tell he'd be happy about the mid-season draft. He going up against McInerney and other rucks in the next few weeks is going to be interesting. But yeah, you can only play who's in front of you. Goldie, would he have this impact against Nankervis? Maybe not, but he didn't have to. So, luckily the ruck battle went our way, and he gets a 7 for it. So, good job, Goldie. He's doing what we need him to do. Peter Wright, I thought he was good. He's really shown us how important he can be when playing well, which is great. He was a marking target in wet conditions. Didn't take heaps, but he at least provided a contest and got us clean air around the ground a few times. He kicked 2 goals, 3 behinds. Probably should have been 3 goals, 2 behinds. One that he missed, he should have kicked. But yeah, his work around the ground was great. He got his hands on the ball a lot, which isn't common for big men in those wetter conditions. He did a lot of work in the ruck as well. 18 hitouts. That is his highest tally since round 10 last year. So maybe we're seeing him, seeing how he goes on his own for large parts. In case we're thinking about what our structure looks like if Vigo was to come in. That wouldn't surprise me if that's what we were doing. I will say he did waste quite a few plays. There were a couple inside 50s that were very un-Wright-like. He's usually a very good kick. So I'll bump him from an 8 to a 7. I was vibing an 8 straight after the game. When I settled on it, I settled on the 7. Maybe that's harsh, but yeah, I think he's just continuing a pretty good year so far. So good job, Peter. And I think he's one that needed a response as well. Because, he hasn't been at that goal-scoring form that we've seen him at the start. But to, have 5 shots, that's good. Archie Roberts, he gets an 8. I thought he was one of our very best, which is becoming a very common part of his... it's a common theme this year. It's rare to have a kid this young who is just so consistently around your best 5 to 6 players per game. But Roberts, again, he was at that level comfortably. I gave him a vote, actually. I thought he was great. He's almost gotten a vote from you guys too. He was intercepting, which is really important given how often the ball's on ground level. He had an equal game high 9 interceptions, 34 touches, over 500 metres gained, some incredible defensive moments, a few turnovers, like I said, the equal most with McGrath. But I thought that was his best game in the red and black. He gets an 8. He's just fitting so nicely into life as an AFL player. He is a great get. We should be very happy that we've got him in the team because he does look good, doesn't he? Yeah, it's good to see, isn't it? And with Angus Clarke there now, that is, we're just seeing these guys come about. It's good fun. Another 8, I reckon, coming. Oh, you know what? Sam Durham. Maybe he's what am I talking? He's a 9. I feel like for me, the best on ground was so clearly one player. I'll talk about him later. But then after him, it was so clearly Sam Durham. In my eyes, it's not even a question. I think Martin's best on ground, Durham's second best, and then there's everyone else. Yeah, I don't think you can convince me otherwise either. I thought Durham was really influential. His work at the contest was fierce. He was so tough. He was really willing the ball into good areas. His effort around stoppages and his, those repeat efforts where he's getting tackled and, shrugging them off, just using his pure strength. And that's rubbing off on those around him, you can tell. And his work inside 50. So he led the ground for score involvements with 12. One of those was a lovely goal from a stoppage inside 50. Another one where he hand-passed off to Caddy. He is so dangerous in 450 stoppages now. So yeah, he's great. And if it wasn't for Nic Martin, he'd be walking home with the Eokin Award. That was his best game of the season. He has had others where I think he's best on ground. But yeah, I think he's just putting together a really good Crichton contending season at the moment. He's right up there, and also right up there in the vote. I think he's 3rd in the Everything Essendon vote behind Merrett and Martin. So that is good. 9 out of 10. Well done, Sam Durham. Jaxon Prior. I thought he responded well. I reckon since round 2, because round 1 he was really shaky. Round 2 against the Crows, he was borderline droppable. But since then, I think he's only really had just the one bad game. And when he isn't playing badly, he's pretty solid back there. And it's games like this that really suit him, you know, when we don't have big key forwards to worry about getting separation on. Because he often finds himself in one-on-one contests with guys that he shouldn't be on. And it's, you know, when those are happening, he lets himself down a bit. But that was never going to happen with Lynch and Nankervis missing. He could just remain defensively accountable while getting his hands on the footy a lot, you know, in one pretty easy swoop. 20 kicks on a greasy night is a good effort, and I'd be surprised if anyone really had anything to that negative to say about his ball use. I thought maybe not his usual punchy best, but he wasn't doing much bad with it. So I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. I thought he was good. Now, drink break. I've been excited for this. I've been eyeing it off after every player rating that I've done. So, the usual plan... Why is this straw... Oh my god. The usual plan was to... and this was from Liu, who has sent through a drink suggestion a few times now. Which I will get to, don't worry. But I couldn't. Instead, I've got... And I don't remember who sent this. And I don't even know if anyone sent this. I just remember seeing the words Nippy's honeycomb. And then I was in the shops and I saw that honeycomb drink. And I was like, you know what? That's the next one. So thank you to whoever suggested it. It is the Nippy's iced honeycomb flavoured drink. Alright, negative points for the straw. I hate that. I'm going to let that one sit on me. I'm going to sit on it, sorry. I'll give you the rating for that at the end. That's an interesting one. I have to think about it. I might have to revisit it too. Alright, Mason Redman. Look, I'll start by saying, okay, so... I do think Mason Redman may have been unwell. I think it's been pretty well documented that he may have had an upset stomach. He left the ground to go into the rooms and returned holding his belly. He apparently went to the bathroom. And then apparently he was leaving pretty unpleasant smells in the huddle, according to his own teammates. So, yeah, he wasn't looking all that strong or commanding. But I think we can probably give him the pass, you know, on account of the runs. Even with his stomach doing backflips, I still think he had some nice moments. It wasn't like he was, completely out of the game, but I think you could just tell that he wasn't 100% right. Also, by the way, I believe he might have suffered a rolled ankle, which makes things even worse. I don't know if there's doubt for the Brisbane match, but that would be really annoying if he was to be sidelined along with Reid and Langford. So hopefully, there's nothing there. Hopefully his stomach's feeling better. He gets a 6 out of 10. Yeah, drink some water. Drink some water, Mason. Xavier Duursma. I thought his stats probably looked better than what his game was. I'll start by saying that. And I'm a huge Duursma fan, by the way. You guys would know. I hype him up when I think he's had a big game. Because I just love when underrated players have an impact. And, I think this guy's probably one of the better wingers in the comp. I'm happy to say that. And that last quarter was proof of, that hard work and that gut running and maturity despite him being a younger player. Because he just ran wherever he wanted to. The Tigers, they were tiring out, but he was still going. He was very measured in his work rate. He racked up uncontested possessions and, helped us ice the clock a bit and control the game. So I liked the way he ended. I thought the first half also was a bit iffy, and there was some space opening up for the Tigers to get those longer distance goals. But yeah, I thought he was good. I'm going to give him a 7. Solid performance from Duursma after a best on ground, for the Bombers at least, performance last week. Nate Caddy, he was pretty quiet. The conditions do make it tough for marking forwards. But yeah, I thought he was comprehensively beaten by not just a defender, and I want to talk about this guy a bit, Campbell Gray. So he came from Essendon's VFL. Was it mid-season draft or SSP or something? I didn't really check. He looked good. He was spoiling everything coming his way. The only goal that Caddy kicked was in open play, and it was pretty much just him finishing off hard work from Durham. Outside of that, he really wasn't a factor in this game inside 50 at all. And I thought Gray just kept him down really well, stopped his scoring, because Caddy has been scoring, but, Gray didn't let that happen. I'd love to see his stats. I should have done that before this, because, I thought Caddy was completely out of the game, and Gray just seemed to be doing everything right. So Caddy, just the one mark. He was probably really frustrated because he clearly had a down night in the air, but at least he was still getting himself around the ground to be a presence a bit in open play. Some forwards, if you take out the air, you take out their whole game, but with Caddy, he's clearly got more to him. So he managed to be a non-liability, which is good. That is always good when you're having a down night, but you're not a liability. That is, especially for a young player. That's a good sign. So 5 out of 10, but not unhappy with it. Zach Reid, yay. Look, hopefully it's not an injury. Hopefully we're all just, being overly dramatic and exaggerating and but yeah, if it is, because as I've said, I'm recording before scans, but if this is a strain, then yeah, there'd be a chance he doesn't, come back until after the bye. So yeah, just tough situation. We'll see what happens. His game before the injury, it's tough to really think back on it. I do remember Reid, having an influence. He was not really responsible for any noteworthy players because of their lack of tools, but he was intercepting well and giving us a sturdy base down there with McKay. It was good to see them working well together. So hopefully we do get more of it before the end of the season. But yeah, I'll give him a 7, but not happy at all. Ben McKay. I thought Ben McKay was pretty solid. I won't rate him too highly because he's playing on a first-year player. Jonty Fall is not Jeremy Cameron. But the only goal he gave away was a free kick that wasn't a free kick. And aside from that, when the ball came his way, it was killed or intercepted and snuffed out. The Tigers that did the damage were the runners coming from the other zones. They kicked some unreal snags. They really shouldn't have kicked that many goals, by the way. And they didn't even kick many to begin with. So yeah, I thought our defence was good. I thought he had it easy, Ben. He didn't have anything tough to do, but he did his job well. And I think he's playing good footy at a good time. Because we're going to need him to stand up in these next few weeks. So I'm going to give Ben McKay a 7. Good to see him, the Bronx cheers. It's been a long time since that. That was Port Adelaide, I think, wasn't it? When he was really struggling at the start of the year. But I think since then, he's lifted and he's been one of our, I'm going to say one of our better players these last few. Even last week I thought he was good on Norton. So yeah, last few weeks he's been good. Matt Guelfi, return game. You'll love to see it. There were a few of those. He was sitting on Nick Vlosten for most of the game, doing what he did for us last year. I remember round 1 he did the same on Sicily. Later on the year, he kept Whitfield down. And yeah, we see it again. He plays a defensive role in the forward line, making sure their best users and interceptors can't do much. And I don't think Vlosten managed to get much going. He got plenty of the ball, but it didn't feel like he was really having an impact. Guelfi, of course, also managed to sneak in a goal in his return game. And that's something we should mention, actually, by the way. His return game. So he's been sidelined for pretty much all of the preseason. He had that hamstring injury that required surgery before the year was close to getting going. And now to come back, play his role for the team in his first game, whereas, guys like Caldwell and Langford struggled to get going initially after their layoffs. Yeah, we've got to be happy with that. He's always been someone who returns well from injury, so I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. And you know what? We could have used him last week, I know he wouldn't have won the game, but he would have really helped us with Bailey Dale. That's who we were missing. So he clearly still has a role in our forward line when he plays like that. So yeah, he gets a 7 out of 10. Back to this drink. It just tastes like milk. I kind of get the aftertaste, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Angus Clarke. How good's this kid, by the way? What an unreal debut. It was just nice to watch. I feel like everyone watching had a smile. He's clearly going to be a fan favourite. The interviews after the match were gold. I love him. And everyone loves him. Not just Bomber fans, but everyone. I feel like everyone that watched him got behind him a bit. You get sucked into a debut like that. And really, the great build-up to the game with his family. Then he comes out, kicks a huge first goal, kicks an even bigger second goal. Before you know it, he's got 3 at half-time. Then he sets up Guelfi's goal. He was involved in the first of the game too, so he's getting involved. He wasn't just doing nothing. It wasn't a debut. He was playing a good game of footy. He almost kicked a ripper. If that didn't hit the post, if that went in, I think Paddy Cripps would have hand-delivered him the Brownlow medal. That was a big debut performance. He was great. Really, really good attacking wingman's performance, which is very surprising because that's not what he's been playing in the VFL. He's been a defender. Last few weeks been a wingman, but still, more defensive half if anything. But yeah, ran all night on Friday. Most distance covered. looked spent by the end of it. But yeah, great debut. We've picked up an absolute gem in this kid. I said it when we drafted him. He's going to be a good player, but I didn't think he'd come in and be, like that straight away. He really did exceed expectations. He probably gets the Rising Star nomination too. I haven't seen the rest of the footy this weekend, but on the big stage, on debut, did just feel like a really great night. And he probably made the game a lot funner than it was. If that's Guelfi kicking those 3 goals, I think we're probably still, stress mode and probably upset with the performance. But because it's a debutant, lifting the team, the energy of the crowd lifting as well, he genuinely felt important. So I'm going to give him I was going to give him an 8, but I kind of want to give him a 9. I really like Angus Clarke. Look, first game, yeah, I'm going to give him a 9. I think on debut, you get a bump up, I feel like if you do well on debut, you bump it up to a higher grade. I'm giving him a 9. That's not compared to other players. I thought there were, quite a few better than him. But yeah, for a first game player to dish that up, that is great. And yeah, it just looks like a ripper of a kid, doesn't he? I'm very excited. Yeah, good fun. And more to come. There are more to come. 6 debutant, but there are more. Nic Martin, finally for the players. He gets the 10. Yeah, he was just great. He clearly deserved the medal. Wasn't even close. He was stationed up in the midfield, having fun out there playing champagne footy. He looked unreal. Some of the things he were doing, you shouldn't do in a footy field. Just a class above. That I think when we talk about Richmond and how undermanned they are, they've got premiership players out there. They've got very good players out on the field. But yeah, he really wasn't expected to be that much better than everyone else, I feel, but he did look just a class above. So yeah, 3 Brownlow votes, the Oaken Trophy. Haven't given out too many 10s this year, but I think he deserves it. And finally, for our coach, Brad Scott, I think a 6 is probably fair. I'm never going to give a coach anything less than a 6 after a win. I don't care about expectations going in, especially when the expectations for us are so low as well. Richmond beat Gold Coast and Carlton. They're not horrendous. And yes, they've got players out, but so do we. We've got more players out, if anything. So yeah, be harsh if you want. I think a 6 seems fair. We got the job done. Didn't really struggle too much in the end. We move on to play Brisbane. We got more debutants. A 6 debutant. We have to give them credit for that. The kids are getting played. And at the start of the year, this happened a lot in the comments. People were saying that they wouldn't mind losing if it meant we're playing the kids and giving debutants a go. Right now, we're doing that, but also getting wins on the board. So, yeah, got to be happy with what we're seeing, I think. But yeah, that is that. Let me just have this... Oh, yeah, sorry. Someone did want me to, at the end of videos, rate the drinks. So... honestly, guys... apologies to whoever recommended this. It does just taste like milk. One more go. Yeah, it's like there's a slight aftertake, taste, but that is milk. And you know what? To be fair, I like milk. I'll give it a 5. But I was expecting more. I was disappointed. No, I'm not disappointed. I was just expecting more. That's all though. Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you for watching. If you've gotten to this long, good stuff. Some fun performances. We love to see that. By the way, guys, if you are still around, make sure you head over to the Bomber Banter YouTube channel on Wednesday night. I'm going to be over there talking to Fiona about the mid-season draft. That is fun. That is right around the corner. We get a look at 4 new players, potentially. And yeah, more to come from this channel as well in the week. I'll have a mid-season draft preview out. I'll have a mid-season draft review out. And then we're onto the Brisbane game. It's a busy week, isn't it? Big week for the club. So let's see how we go with it. Cheers for watching. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And as always, go Bombers.